Okay, so last episode, I mentioned how trying to reunite the old Princess Alliance is as good a plot as any to follow, because it means we could travel around Etheria and explore the setting and meet new characters in a way that makes complete sense. And I also said I was a bit on the fence about the whole exploring the setting aspect. Well, that's because the setting of She-ra is a bit half-baked. You saw my thoughts on Plumeria, the Sea Gate, and now here's mine about Drill. This place is supposed to be like the only large-scale industrious kingdom on the planet, and yet that is not made readily apparent from what little we were able to see of it. We're only told this through dialogue, like how we're told the Sea Gate is somehow able to keep the Horde out despite the fact we see no offensive measures to back that up, or Plumeria was a part of the old Princess Alliance and was close to the border with the Horde, and yet it hasn't been taken by them in the decades since it fell apart, even though the people there have neither natural defenses or military might. This show has a habit on telling us about places and things that exist within its setting, but doesn't take the time to adequately explore any of it.
Why is Entrapta so important?
She's a brilliant inventor. She's a pretty big deal in the Etherean makers community.
We will never hear anything about this organization of engineers and builders, even though Bo and Princess Entrapta of Drill are a part of it. Yet I wanted to mention that this really doesn't take too much away from She-ra's real qualities. You see, while its bread and butter might be show don't tell, the real meat and potatoes of She-ra is its characters. Some are more of quality than others, yet their interactions and the arcs are the main thing that I enjoyed about this show, and it's its main strength. It's a shame that they didn't take more time to better flesh out, the world they live in. And this world does feel like just a backdrop for the characters to exist in. It really doesn't bother me that much. This is just an analytical review that hops from episode to episode, and I'm going to talk about anything that bugs me, even if it's not that bad or serious. Just keep that in mind. This episode is decent for what it was trying to do, and I like how it establishes our new character, Entrapta.
Entrapta will be a total catch for the rebellion. My mom's gonna be so impressed.
Yep, there's more little moments like this about Glimmer feeling as if she needs to prove herself capable to Angela. It helps reinforce this idea of Glimmer feeling a need to prove she's worthy to her own mother. This was actually the point on my second watch where I started cluing into this fact.
And here's my newest one.
Sonic Arrow!
When will we ever need a sonic arrow? If we have to, wake up really early?
This whole exchange with the sonic arrow is known as Chekhov's gun. It's a storytelling rule/device where you bring up an item, have the character draw attention to said item, and establish it's important for later. I've been reading stories for years and writing some on the side as a hobby while digging into concepts like this, and when you do so, spotting things like this, it becomes fairly easy. So I personally knew that this thing was definitely going to be important later for solving the conflict, even if I didn't know exactly what then and there.
Must have been a rock slide. Any loud sound could cause another slide.
So by this scene's logic, when Adora transforms, this sequence of her transforming into She-ra is an actual in-universe thing that happens, and it's not just flair for the TV show. Don't get me wrong, it's a bit funny to watch Bo panicking as the music blares, there's all this shine, but it also reminds me of this.
I want to see what their final form looks like.
So how come no one ever decides to shoot at her when she's transforming? This is what I'm getting at. So the main plot for this episode is they're going to Drill to recruit Entrapta.
Something's wrong. The castle's distress beacon is lit.
Aren't distress beacons supposed to be seen and heard from vast distances? I mean, in the opening of this episode, this thing went off and there was sirens, yet it's now inexplicably gone?
Whoa, wait, be careful!
Also, who puts a pit trap in front of the main gate triggered by a large rock? Princess Entrapta, apparently. This is the first hint we have of what she's like. I'll get more into that later.
You okay?
This place feels wrong. It's nothing.
Adora, why would you say two completely contradictory statements? It's either nothing or something is wrong. It cannot be both. So the main antagonistic force in this episode are Entrapta's robots gone kill crazy, because she was experimenting on a first one's data crystal in the opening of the episode, and it seemed to corrupt her bots, who are also partially first one's tech. I'm glad the writers knew better than try and shoehorn the Horde into this situation. It keeps things fresh, as if you beat down the antagonist too much, a sense of threat will be lost. You need to keep that in mind if you're trying to develop a story of your own. If you just keep beating down the antagonist, eventually people are just going to stop taking them seriously. So Glimmer and Adora get separated from Bo, and now we meet Entrapta. She doesn't have any magical powers like most other princesses, but is intelligent and very inventive, which is why they're here to recruit her. Seeing her in the opening,
Fascinating. My robots seem to be responding to the code. This is remarkable.
and then interact with Adora and Glimmer,
But we sort of let ourselves in.
And then we let ourselves out of your cage trap thing. You're abnormally tall.
Hello. I like your sword. It's first one's tech, right? Can I touch it?
she is energetic and eccentric. She turned the castle she lives in into a maze that even she has trouble navigating through, and I mean, the bots are going kill crazy. She knows that, yet calls them here anyway,
Oh, and they're sound activated. Here, I'll show you.
just to demonstrate that feature. She really doesn't seem to fully grasp the severity of the situation, instead treating the whole event like it's just any other experiment. So Adora, or rather She-ra, gets corrupted by the same thing that's messing up the bots. Her sword is established to not just be magic, but it's also First One's technology, and Entrapta's bots are partially it, so that checks out. She gets equally as kill crazy at the bots, but Glimmer thinks fast and gets that sword away for her. Then we get Drunk Adora, who's my second favorite mood in the whole show, right behind Mermista's entire personality.
Sound activates the robots.
What robots?
The ones that are attacking us.
Oh.
And I'm glad they didn't run this into the ground, but back to Entrapta now.
Infected them with some sort of a virus. Would that make She-ra sick?
Well, I'd have to take her apart to be sure.
Entrapta casually speaking about dissecting an unconscious Adora just to figure out what's wrong with her really shows how narrow-minded and socially inept she is. I mean, Entrapta needs Glimmer yelling at her
This experiment is a failure.
But what if it's not? No, you're right. It's a failure.
that this experiment is a failure, or for her to actually grasp that fact. When one would think the killer robots running around and the citizens of Dro hiding in fear would have clued her into that by now. Unless she didn't notice any of that and just sat in the vents observing the bots all day, which I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Getting back to Bo, he ends up meeting the kitchen staff from the opening after he gets separated from Glimmer and Adora.
Please keep your voice down, sir. The robots respond to sound.
From the moment I heard the robots use sound to find people, I knew that the sonic arrow was going to be vital for solving the conflict here. They wouldn't have had this item and that specific detail about these bots repeated if that wasn't the case. I mean, I saw it through, but that's just what happens when you watch so many shows, movies, and books from an analytical point of view. You tend to pick up these things quite easily. So Bo ends up needing to team up with the kitchen staff to fight the bots, but Bo's quiver ends up empty for some reason. He barely fires it at all, and yet all he's left with is a sonic arrow? I get that you have to establish the plot device here, but was there really no other organic way to do this other than just making him suddenly run out of every arrow in his quiver? So Bo ends up needing to rally the kitchen staff to fight and win against the robots, and it's here where I felt like Bo needed more to him. We get so little on this guy besides being a foil for Glimmer. He's just a normal guy, like he stated, and he grows up to become a master archer and a good engineer. He feels pretty arced out, and I wish we could have, I don't know, seen any of that progression. Also, the kitchen staff being able to fight off the robots is done like this. So I'm really glad the Horde isn't here to have their threat level lowered again. I understand that the writers are trying to say here and back in episode 4 that anyone can stand up and fight for yourselves, but it gets muddled when I watch a plate decapitate a robot because the threats are made out to be so egregiously weak. Getting back to Entrapta, Glimmer, and Adora, they eventually make their way to the door where the crystal is, but they can't get in.
Door is infected too. It won't let us in. That is so smart.
She is very rigid in her thinking, seeing everything that has happened as just an experiment, and no matter how bad things get, she's completely convinced there is something interesting to learn here and does not notice the surrounding damage.
Incredible development. The bots seem to be working together.
Entrapta acknowledges the failure of her experiment, yet is determined to keep on taking notes. This is important for understanding her at the end of the episode, as she would fix the crystal that started this mess in the first place.
With a few adjustments, I'm sure the next experiment will be a success.
Still wanting to see if she can get it to work. She does not grasp the risks to drill, only caring about the next experiment and what that will entail. Now, just to be clear, I don't think Entrapta has a Machiavellian ends justify the means thing. More, she just has this insatiable curiosity she pursues regardless of everything else. I don't remember where I heard this, but the best way I have heard Entrapta described is as an energetic puppy running around looking for any pleasing stimuli and not being able to understand the damage they cause on the way. Entrapta just likes inventing and learning and doesn't get that it can have serious consequences for others, an ethic that she'll cause problems for everyone else in the future. So everyone ends up in the room with the crystal to take it out, the final fight being as ridiculous and stupid as you would imagine. One thing I want to note here is when you take power off to the crystal, it starts generating its own and the red veins start pulsating around like arteries from a heart.
It's running on its own power now!
We learned how the first ones combined magic and technology later on in the show, but I like how they showed it here without it being too, I don't know, in your face. It makes rewatching the show vastly more interesting. They end up destroying the crystal with Bo using his sonic arrow to, well, draw the robots to destroying it. We shall never see or even get a mention of the sonic arrow after this episode, even though Bo keeps acting like it was the best thing to exist since rubber tires. Yet Glimmer doesn't seem to call him out on how situational that arrow was during his, taunt.
Oh, is that what you were trying to say, Glimmer? That I was right?
Yes.
And my sonic arrow was a good idea?
Yes, it was brilliant.
I called it a taunt, but it's really just lighthearted banter between old friends. So this episode ends with another princess on the roster, a tiny few details about the first one's tech being magic and technology combined, and we meet another character, one that's going to be a nice foil for someone else. You know who I mean, and I can't wait to talk about it later. So that was episode 6 of Overanalyzing She-ra. If you like this video and want to see more, then hit that thumbs up and the subscribe button, then bell to get notifications about the next episode. I'm going to be updating this series every Thursday, so please share with other fans, and check out my channel for my video essays and music analysis videos in the meantime. You might find them enjoyable.